but we felt we owed it to our community to go over and beyond to make those connections. And it was always challenging, but we found a way to make it work.
Hey, everybody. Welcome to Finding a Way podcast, the podcast for positive change. I'm your host, Jim, and today we have a very special conversation with none other than, I don't even know what to call this man. I don't even know where to start.
Keith Carson. That's it.
That's good.
That's it. You stop right there.
Straight up.
Yeah.
Well. Keith, how you doing today?
I'm doing pretty good. I can't complain at all. Yeah.
Not at all.
Yeah.
That's good to hear. What are days looking like for you these days? I know you had a little change of pace recently.
Yeah, I retired after 32 years of being an elected official in Alameda County. Very fortunate and blessed by the 5th District, which includes Albany, Berkeley, Piedmont, Emeryville, to represent them, part of 5 individuals on the board of Alameda County Board of Supervisors, representing 14 cities, about 1,700,000 individuals, as well as unincorporated area, on all things dealing with health and human services and public safety. So the sheriff's office, the district attorney's office, the public defender's office, chief probation officer, public hospitals, public clinics, mental health, public health, all of those things, the 5 of us oversee with about 11,000 county employees. There's a lot more that goes on behind the scenes on that around housing and telecommunications and all of those things. And so after 32 years of being blessed to serve the individuals, I decided I wanted to retire. And I was very fortunate to go out the way I wanted to go out.
Yeah. Well, we thank you for, your years of public service. He's been the people's champ since I was -2 years old. So that's why I didn't even want to start to try and unpack all that this man has done. You heard him kind of rattle off just the tip of the iceberg. But once again, we just appreciate having you. Because, I know you're retired, but you're still busy. From what I understand. You want to talk a little bit about what your days look like now?
Oh, my days right now, my wife has been with me since day one of all of this whole journey. Even when I was campaigning, we were out knocking on doors together, the original campaign, even before that, actually. Because I used to work for Congressman Ron Dellums, who represented this area for more than 27 years. In the United States Congress. And for 15 years, I had the privilege of working on his staff, both here in Oakland, representing the East Bay, and also in Washington, D.C., which was fairly unique in the Dellums office because most people either worked in Washington, D.C., or they worked in the district office, which was Oakland and also Lafayette. But I had a unique opportunity with a person who I knew on his staff, and we exchanged homes. So, like, I'd live in D.C. for half a year, and she'd stay in my house for half a year. And then I'd drive her car, assume her job, she'd assume my job. So it gave me the exposure in Washington to see how Congress works, to see how the federal government operates. That was a little bit unique compared to my other colleagues here. So
well, that's like the original Airbnb or something almost.
There you go.
Stuff.
So my wife Maria, even would come to D.C. and hang out and then fly back home. Yeah.
So well, shout out to Maria, man. Been there from day one.
Oh yeah,
We'd love to hear that.
That's my rock. She keeps me in place.
Yeah. So she's also keeping you busy these days, I hear.
Ooh, man, let me tell you.
You thought you retired.
I haven't yet because she got all these honey-dos, a long list of honey-dos that she has out there. And I mean manual work, like, on the roof, cutting branches and cleaning out the gutters, and then in the house cleaning the stuff and going through things for 15, 20 years and packaging it up. And so I'm going like, maybe I should have stayed at work.
You got a backlog.
I would have got paid for it. Now I'm paying for it for not doing it on a regular basis.
Right.
But I'm happy I have the opportunity to do it, and I'm healthy enough to do it.
Yeah, that's awesome. You also said you've been getting in the gym a lot lately.
Oh, yeah. Well, the gym has always been a basic part of my routine.
Right.
Yeah, I can't afford a psychiatrist.
Okay.
And so to get the stress off of me,
what you on the fast bag or what?
hey, I do the heavy bag. I do a lot of rowing. I do elliptical machines. I do weights. I do stretches. You know, for old men and old people, you got to kind of stay limber and that kind of thing. And occasionally try to hit the pool and do some laps.
Yeah, well,
try to mix it up.
Yeah, it makes sense now because I've gotten to go on a couple of those walks with you, and I'm always struggling to keep up. I'm like, what is going on here? These people.
Well, that's not supposed to happen, brother. Because you're a young brother. And
tell my body that
I'm supposed to be trying to huff and puff and keep up with you.
Man, but I got to put the work in. It seems you got quite the routine.
Yeah, well, again, that's one of the things I was introduced to. Working in Ron's office. He was a fitness buff.
Okay.
Did a lot of weights. And also, for people who may remember Ron Delms or may not, he was also the mayor of Oakland for a while. Mm-hmm. And he would always run and do all those kinds of things. And kind of being a younger person at that point in time in the office, I kind of was drawn into that. And so I'm really appreciative from that standpoint because I went to high school and everything. I didn't play sports. I didn't participate in sports. And so that was good to have that. And, you know, my dad was very supportive of all of that, and my mom too. So, yeah.
Well, you know, you're just passing on the good advice, you know.
Oh, yeah.
Good game, for sure.
Play it forward.
There you go. All right, so you kind of put us in the direction we always like to go. We want to take it back. You talked about high school. Let's talk about Keith Carson's journey into, I guess, public servitude. Is that the way I want to say that?
Yeah, servitude is a good word. You know, my parents are both a part of that migration from the South.
Okay.
Both of them came from Texas.
Okay.
Different parts of Texas.
What part? We got
Fort Worth and Dallas, Texas.
Yeah. Right on.
Neither one of them knew their parents. It's kind of interesting that both my dad and mom would not have had the privilege, and that's because their parents passed away at a much early age, and they were kind of raised by their siblings. And then my dad migrated out here and then brought my mother out here soon after that into Berkeley, California.
Okay.
And again, since it was a part of that historical black migration away from the South to different parts of the United States, he landing in Berkeley in the 40s, 50s, and 60s was still a part of the struggle for equal rights was going on. So I kind of grew up in that household that even though my father never graduated from high school, my mother eventually got her high school diploma as an adult. Both of them worked. Matter of fact, my dad drove a coal truck for Berkeley Coal and Fuel. And so I was born and raised in Berkeley and went to all the Berkeley schools. With Malcolm X, which is now in Ashby and University, but it was Lincoln Elementary School when I went there, you know, and Willard Junior High School and Berkeley High School, and went to church at Progressive Missionary Baptist Church on King and Alcatraz, which is where I still go. So I grew up in South Berkeley, and South Berkeley historically was known as one of those areas with a lot of rough things going on and you know, a lot of challenges in that community. And I was, even though I had both my mom and dad who cared a lot about my sisters, two sisters and me, I got kind of caught up in that life. My dad kept trying to pull me out of it. And I got kicked out of public schools as a result of that. And then my parents had to spend some money to get me into Catholic school, even though we were not Catholics. And so I kind of grew up in that environment.
Did you go to St. Mary's or?
I went to Columbus, which is right there on Alcatraz and San Pablo. I went there until I graduated, and then I got back, was able to apply and get back into Willard Junior High School.
Gotcha.
Because as I said, I got kicked out of public schools early on. And so living in Berkeley, there was a lot going on in Berkeley around that time. And even as a child, my dad would include me and take me with him to church meetings, which were talking about civil rights, because there were still lynchings going on throughout this country at that time, fully aware of it. Blacks were still told to stay in their place, and if you didn't stay in your place, unfortunately, there was no real law or protection for you, and a lot of things could happen. And so, even in Berkeley and Oakland, in my early years, I can remember even before high school that there were picket signs of blacks and others picketing to have equal access to some of the buildings on Shattuck and restaurants on Shattuck. You could work as a dishwasher, but you weren't welcomed as a patron. Even though you were there to spend your own money.
Yeah.
Right? So all of those things impressed me, not in a positive way, but were an impression in terms of my development. And as I said, my father was very present in trying to make sure I was aware of what kind of world we inherited and we lived in. As a result of my exploratory part of me in the early ages, I kind of got involved in politics as a result of doing something I shouldn't have been doing. And I was in West Berkeley and doing some stuff, and the police came, handcuffed me and was getting ready to take me away. And there was a guy named Harold Davis, who I did not know at that time, that witnessed all of this and came up and asked the police what was going on. And the police told him, and he said, well, I got this program. I volunteer for the YMCA, and there's a program called Youth in Government. Would you remand him to Youth in Government as opposed to taking him to juvenile hall? And the officer said, well, kid, what are you saying? And I go like, well, I know where you're taking me.
I don't want to go there.
I don't want to go there. I'll go with this guy. I don't even know him, but I'll go with him, right? And Youth in Government really was a program throughout California that introduced kids into government to the extent that we held weekly meetings to educate us about that. And again, I was still not yet graduating out of high school when getting this kind of introduction. And once a year in Sacramento, kids from all over the state would go and be elected representatives and pass laws and do all the things that assembly people and Senate people do and the governor does. So we were educated in kind of that, and that was kind of fun for me. But also, unbeknownst to me, it was kind of introducing me to the body of politics more directly, as opposed to the way that my father was introducing me by saying, you going with us on this picket line, and you need to understand what this is all about. And again, being an old guy, it was good to have the remembrance that growing up in Berkeley, I saw Martin Luther King in person speak at UC Berkeley.
Wow.
I actually saw him speak at Progressive Missionary Baptist Church, which is where we went to church and where my wife and I still go to church, which is not a big church, not a fancy church, but saw him speak there. Saw John F. Kennedy speak at UC Berkeley, and saw Robert Kennedy the day earlier before he was shot and killed in Los Angeles, campaigning in Berkeley on Sacramento Street. And so the Vietnam War going on and all of these things around social justice, and then watching on TV Martin Luther King be assassinated, all of those things was a movement that was going on in this country. And Berkeley was kind of at the centerpiece of a lot of that. And I was just fortunate to be born in Berkeley, raised in Berkeley. My parents weren't just on the sidelines, but really, as uneducated individuals, wanted a better life for our family, but for blacks and people of color in particular. And that whole holistic way of getting engaged was my introduction to politics.
Right on. Man, that's wonderful. First of all, it's a beautiful story. But it's something that I think is kind of, at least for me, I kind of almost forget how much of a focal point Berkeley was when it comes to movements and stuff like that. During that time period, like, I grew up in the era where it's like keep Berkeley weird and stuff like that. Like I like Berkeley just for, different things. I understood some of the historical, relevance and everything, People's Park and, people always doing demonstrations at the campus and whatnot. But hearing just that level of detail about, all of these kind of influential movements and moments that were happening in your life growing up there is,
Yeah,
forget
it
about
was
that.
it was a historical time period. I mean, like you said, the free speech movement with Mario Savio, which most people don't know about, really was a lightning rod in the United States for ensuring that people have the ability to speak freely and be themselves. And a lot of that actually wound up at the Supreme Court in terms of establishing laws that gave people those kind of rights. The Vietnam War was very active in this community. Matter of fact, all of Berkeley was shut down at one point in time. The National Guard came and had to come in, and you had to show your ID in order to get to Berkeley, get out because of the demonstrations that were taking place around the Vietnam War. Also, the whole movement regarding Spanish-speaking and Latin and individuals' rights took a big hold here. Cesar Chavez and Dolores Huerta were always in Berkeley, a part of mobilizing and thinking through that whole struggle for equality for people of Spanish-speaking descent, and then the disabilities movement for people who were physically challenged really gave birth in Berkeley. And I remember as a kind of an early adult, a number of people who were wheelchair bound, blocking streets and protesting to say, hey, we're equal and should get our equality as well as everybody else. So, when people don't really think about that kind of history, you talk about the quirkiness of Berkeley a little bit. The Berkeley Free Clinic, which is still there, was really a part, along with the Black Panther Party, which was birthed in Oakland and gave birth there with Bobby Seale and Huey Newton, which were individuals were used to seeing all around the city of Oakland on a regular basis, right? While they were movement leaders of an international level, let me say that you would, by the time that the Black Panther Party started, I was a student at Merritt College, which was still on Grove Street, which was still on Martin Luther King, and so it wasn't uncustomary to see Bobby or Huey in Merritt College meeting with the Black Student Union movement and actually some of the Hollywood stars, some white stars, being there on a regular basis because it was the epicenter of the helping to develop the Black Panther Party, which not only national, went international. And I say that because years later, I've had the honor and the privilege to go to China, and in China, they still have monuments and they still have places that show where Angela Davis and Huey Newton and Bobby Seale were, and I've had an opportunity to go to Cuba, and there's lots of existing infrastructure there that shows you the Black Panther Party was present there because Huey actually did exile in Cuba, and we actually met with him when he was exiled from the United States in Cuba, along again with Ron Dellums and Fidel Castro, Barbara Lee. And so there is that rich history in that community of activism, but out of that activism, today we still have a number of community clinics. It was kind of out of the activism, out of the quirkiness of the Berkeley Free Clinic that throughout the country you have Asian health centers and Asian clinics. You have Hispanic health centers and Hispanic clinics. You have black clinics in black neighborhoods serving black people, serving brown people, serving Asian and Pacific Islander people. So, and that really kind of birthed out of the Black Panther movement, out of the free speech movement, out of the Berkeley kind of being the epicenter of taking on these challenges.
Yeah. I have to just take that in. I'm sorry. What do you think it was about the space that kind of allowed this energy to kind of cultivate? Because you talked about all these things like Berkeley and Oakland kind of being this epicenter. Do you think that there was something in particular that was occurring? Do you think it was just the people that happened to converge here, or just by happenstance and chance?
Yeah, I don't have any, way of saying how it all happened.
Mm-hmm.
But if you look back, there was migration patterns that was taking place across the country at that time, right? Mm-hmm. And it's still kind of coming out of the segregated communities that we're still fighting to keep from coming back again today, unfortunately.
Right.
A lot of people assembled in different parts of the United States. New York was one of those places where multiculturalism kind of evolved and neighborhoods kind of coexisted. Mm-hmm. And in the West Coast, kind of the Bay Area in particular, Berkeley was at. Mm-hmm. The fact that we had a major institution such as UC Berkeley, right, which attracted progressive-minded professors and teachers that came there that taught African history, that taught Asian history, that taught Spanish-speaking history in a way that reflected the real history that took place, not the manufactured history that Donald Trump today is trying to keep us from really understanding from those who experienced it, right? Mm-hmm. But the sanitized one, which is, we don't want to talk about our differences. We want to say we're all together, but we know that's not true.
Right. Yeah, no, I think that makes a lot of sense. I definitely think I can understand that the university element being maybe a key piece of that, because I feel like, that's kind of what I would always hear. Like, Cal Berkeley is the place for revolutionaries, and like that's always, where the demonstrations would be and where people will always be, protesting. Students are flooding the streets for their causes and their beliefs. But yeah,
But even with that, and kind of reflecting on it, it took people of color. It took the disability community, it took the gay, lesbian, and transgender community to go up to UC Berkeley where we weren't really present.
Right.
We weren't really students there, right? It was the gathering place to say, hey, we don't see ourselves on this campus.
Yeah, because
right?
It's also
you can open it up for us, right? And what the opening up for us meant that there was lots of days in which you didn't make it to school because what they called the blue meanies at that time, which was the Alameda County Sheriff's Office and all of them were up on campus because we were on campus. We weren't supposed to be there. Right. And, there were many days there was tear gas and all the other stuff. That's why you got People's Park, right? Yeah. And those kind of movements because we saw you're saying one thing, but it's not real in terms of what we see. Exactly. And so we're going to go up there and as individuals, as community, and force you to do something different. And eventually they embraced it.
Yeah. And that's like, I think, poetic justice, because it's like, you have this symbol of higher learning. And it's like, if it's not representative of the minds of the public, then what are you really symbolizing? So I think that's definitely appropriate. I want to take it back a little bit again, because you talked about your early childhood and how it kind of informed and how you got exposed to politics, both from your father and through the youth and government program. Does the youth and government program still exist?
Yeah, it does still exist.
That's awesome.
And I think it's still kind of centered in the YMCAs.
Okay, for sure. So if you know any young folks interested in that, definitely point them in that direction.
You're right.
But yeah, was there, I guess, post high school, after being exposed to the youth and government program, just talk a little bit more about your journey.
Yeah, I like everybody else. I was never involved in sports. I kind of was a part of the family working. My dad and mom made sure at an early age that we learned that we had to work.
Value of a dollar.
Yeah, you got to contribute, right? And so while I was at Berkeley High, I was a janitor.
Okay.
Which wasn't very comfortable, with
glamorous in high school.
With high school, when your friends see you, pushing a broom and they go like, "Hey, Keith, pick this up too," right?
Giving you a hard time.
Yeah, while they're on their way to the football game. But I was a janitor. Then I worked at the Berkeley Library, and then I eventually went to. There was a place where high school students went to try to find jobs, and wound up getting a job working in the office of then the mayor, Warren Widener, who was the first African American mayor of the city of Berkeley, and worked in his office. And Warren was a little bit more moderate, not conservative, but moderate, and so the progressive community kept challenging Warren. What happened is the first African American who was on the board of supervisors for Alameda County, and Alameda County was founded in the 1800s, was John George. And John George was another person who I did know, and I got to know through working in Ron Dellum's office. John was bigger than life. While Ron was in Washington, D.C. doing what he did for not only the community but the world, John was here providing services for people through the county government. And John was one of those individuals, really nice guy, really loved John George, funny and everything, very intelligent, but a hard worker, nonstop. Like 24 hours a day he was on, because there was this great demand and there was this time of change that was taking place. And there was people who would go to John and say, "We need you to lead the disability community. Speak for us. We need you to the lesbian, gay, transgender. You speak for us. The black, So it was never stopping. And often I would say to John when I talked to him, "Man, you got to find a little bit of time for you, because you leave a meeting, go to another meeting. So John, unfortunately, had 2 heart attacks, and the second heart attack, while in office, he died. And I was working in Washington, D.C. in Ron's office at the time, and a diverse group of community people came together and said, we need to put forth a name to follow John, because the Board of Supervisors makes the decision in that case. When a person hasn't completed their term, they make the decision who to appoint to fill out that term until they have to run for an open seat.
Right.
And in that process, the moderate Board of Supervisors at that time selected Warren Widener, the mayor of Berkeley, to be it. And the community was a little upset about that, because there were a number of people they had advanced names about and gone through a public process about. I was one of those. I didn't want to be, and I never wanted to be an elected official, to be honest. I loved working for Ron. I learned a lot from Ron. I saw from watching John George and Ron up close that it just had a toll on their life. They were the true public servants who kind of really denied themselves personally, their family personally, to give to the community and make it a better place. So they made, in my opinion, the ultimate sacrifice. John, he lost his life. Ron, I just saw how challenging it was to him. And so I didn't want to be. Yingli Kelly, who was on the Berkeley City Council, first Asian woman, thought she was a great candidate. Pedro Noguera, who was a young rebel rouser up at UC Berkeley in the School of Education, who was a personal friend of mine and still is today. Was another name was advanced, mine was advanced number. And so I publicly, even at a press conference, said I had no interest in and I'd support either of these other individuals. But the Board of Supervisors selected Warren Widener. A year after they selected Warren Widener, he had another year left on his term. The conservative members of the Board of Supervisors actually sought me out and asked for a meeting with me while Warren was still in office. Fred Cooper, who represented Livermore in that area, Charlie Santana, who represented Hayward in that area, kind of people who I didn't politically align myself with, right? Sought me out and said, hey, we made a mistake with him. We've been doing our homework, and while politically we're not necessarily on the same page, we kind of understand from a lot of different people that you wouldn't stab us in the back. You'd be upfront about the differences, and we feel like that's not been the case. And so I told him I still wasn't interested in being a politician. But what happened, the defining moment for me, my wife and I was talking, and I said, well, let me go ask a couple people who are not political, about this. And so we kind of went out in the neighborhoods and kind of knocked on doors and said, hey, do you know what the Board of Supervisors do? And nobody knew, who do they supervise, that kind of thing, right? I was in West Oakland one night. It was around October. I'll never forget it. It was a defining moment. It was starting to get a little dark. I was knocking on doors. I was going back to my car by myself, and there was these 6 brothers standing on the corner. And I was like, oh, wow. It was getting a little dark. And the brothers go like, what are you doing here, man? And I go like, well, I'm thinking about running for supervisor. Well, what is supervisor? What do they do? And I told them. And they said, oh, is that all you doing around? I said, that's all I'm doing here, man. And so I went on to my car, and as I was walking, one of the guys yelled out, hey, man, you need to run for that. Maybe you can get us off this corner. And that hit me so hard. And I started thinking about it and thinking about it and thinking about it. And it was on that pivotal moment that I decided that I would run. And I was running against an incumbent, Warren Widener, who I actually had worked for and liked as a person, but politically we differed. The first time I knocked on 20,000 doors, Maria and I, basically by ourselves. We were everywhere, because we didn't have a lot of money, and we were running against an incumbent. And I lost by 26 votes the first election. And so talking with a number of different people, I said, well, let me start now working on the next campaign. And I had campaign experience. I had the fortunate ability to run several of Ron Dellum's campaigns for Congress. Ran Jesse Jackson's first campaign for president, and I was on his national campaign staff and put together the California campaign, working out of Los Angeles, worked for Bradley out of Los Angeles, a number of other campaigns that were statewide. So I had campaign experience that I was allowed to develop by working in Ron's office. That gave me the opportunity, it gave me the exposure to educate me what it meant, the fundamentals. It gave me the opportunity, even when I made mistakes, Ron was very supportive and encouraging of learn through your mistakes, which kind of is, again, the building block for all the things I do. I got opportunities, and I always fundamentally believe in giving other people opportunities. And when I eventually did win the seat, I made sure that the people who I kind of immediately surrounded myself with were people who I was hopefully giving opportunities. And I mean, I knew they were qualified, not necessarily because they had the degrees and all of the things behind them, but I knew that they had the energy, the will, and desire.
Yeah.
And I had to learn through my mistakes, so we all were going to learn through our mistakes. And from day one, the staff that I've had have been people who had not had that opportunity. And the people that we worked with was to expose them to opportunities. And I think because I had that opportunity and we've given it to other people, we've opened up some doors that probably would not have been open.
100%. Yeah, I can definitely attest to that, man. I think you've done your fair share of paying it forward, and we appreciate you. And that's just wonderful to get all this context and see, you know, what shaped you and the way that you, kind of how you operate. So, but I just want to highlight that moment that you said was kind of the defining moment because, you know, men of faith, and I'm a person that believes that God talks to you in a myriad of ways, but sometimes He just talks straight to you, somebody else's mouth. And if that's not a word right there, like,
hey,
straight up, you need to run so you can get us off this corner. Like that's from the main line to me.
Yeah, it was pretty emotional, you know, and with purpose and intent. Throughout the 32 years that I've had the privilege, because I don't never take it as me, you know, people vote you in, they can vote you out, right? I've been focused on making sure that I went out, our staff constantly went out to the community, to people who would normally not engage in government, to not only say you have a right to be there, you need to be there. Your voice is the only voice that could be there. So, you know, while I constantly had told John George, you know, you need to slow up a little bit. Other than doing our basic work, which we are elected to do, all of our staff, myself included, have been committed to going out in the community. So we disproportionately was at San Quentin on a regular basis for years, for 20, 30 years, right? Working with groups there. The same thing up at Juvenile Hall. People on our staff went out and worked with their respective communities. So the office, not because of Keith, but because it's been a collective participation of the office, have made sure that we hire and showcase and elevate and let them be authentic people who have been disabled. We've had people on our staff who are wheelchair bound, but incredible individuals, right? They were not limited by being wheelchair bound. The individuals had gone off and gotten degrees in school, passed the bar, become lawyers, worked at the Center for Independent Living, and wanted to continue to give back to the community. So they were in our office. They complimented the office because only they could educate people about what they experience. Nobody else can. You can watch it, but you can't. You know. And the same thing with respect to women, women of color. Hermina Sanchez in our office for 18 years started a group called Asian and Pacific Islanders Collective, which was a combination of community-based groups from the Asian Pacific Islander community, including Asians who were prisoners, have been in San Quentin, had been in prison. I mean, so it wasn't just the creaming of the top. It was making sure that we, you know, we on a monthly basis were in high schools, talking to kids, exposing them. The same thing at senior facilities. Those are not necessarily things that are required of you. But we felt we owed it to our community to go over and beyond to make those connections. And it was always challenging. There's only so many hours in a day. People elect you to do your job. But we found a way to make it work.
I love that. What you just said kind of reminds me of the curb cut effect when you talk about designing with people as instead of for people. So especially, the curb cut effect, for those who don't know, comes from actually that movement of the disability demographic kind
Judy
of.
Heumann, who
Yeah,
led that movement
right.
from Berkeley.
There you go. Asserting themselves, making themselves known, and saying, "Hey, we roam the streets just like everybody else, trying to get where we need to go. Want to live independent lives. You guys are building sidewalks in a way that doesn't allow us to do that. So these little ramps that you see with the yellow blocks in the middle of them sometimes on sidewalk corners are results of activism. This is actually, something that wasn't initially thought of for people, and that's because the people who were affected by this design were not involved in the design process. So I think that's just awesome to hear how much of a priority that was, engaging with people from all different backgrounds, walks of life, ways of living, because that's how you actually get things that serve the people instead of just, assuming you know what's best or, trying to come top down with a lot of policy and infrastructure, actually going to the people, soaking up their experiences and trying to find ways to implement solutions. I think that's
Yeah.
what it's all about.
Yeah, I'm glad you mentioned that real briefly. The Ed Roberts Center, which is right across from the Ashby
Ashby
BART
BART
station,
yes.
Ed Roberts, Judy Heumann, and all of them who kind of were the individuals who started the disability movement here in the country out of Berkeley, was an individual who was confined not just to a wheelchair, but was confined to a breathing machine and everything else. But through all of that, just like Judy Heumann, they didn't allow that to keep them back. But the struggle was the journey to make sure that they could have street cuts, curve cuts out. The journey was, hey, can we live? We should be able to live independently
Right.
to the extent that we can, and not you to dictate how we should live just because of our physical challenges. And Judy Heumann, to use her as an example, out of Berkeley, actually was appointed by, I can't remember if it was Clinton, to be a secretary in Washington, D.C. in one of the departments. And she's still around today. She's an incredible individual.
Shout out to Judy. Yeah. So I kind of want to take it from here to a place that highlights some of the work that you've done. You've already spoken so much about, some of the activism that you were involved in and the different demographics that you served. One thing I want to ask you is, what is something that you feel most proud of that you were able to execute in your time of service?
Yeah, I don't think that there's been one thing that I've done. I think there's been a number of things that we've been able to get done, leveraging the expertise, the relationship, the knowledge from a diverse group of individuals. I think what was hard for me at the very beginning was kind of saying, this is kind of what in my head I want to do. And it was staff early on that I worked with that fired me, to be honest. They had to sit me down and say, man, you got too big of a list and you got too big of an ego, and we don't like it. And that's going at risk when, you're talking to the person who theoretically hires you, right? But they really were that frustrated we had to take a year or so at the beginning of me taking office to kind of restructure first me and my mentality and how to operate, and then how we work collectively together. And I say that because on some level, just my position is, while we all individually want things to work our way, it's a balancing act. there's only so much dollars to help you in moving in those directions. There's so much expertise and infrastructure in those directions, and there is way more need at the moment than there are resources, financial, human, and otherwise, to do that. And the reason I wanted to lay that out is because while I have my personal areas that I'd like to focus on, I couldn't let those personal levels override the overarching responsibility that I have and the office had. And the responsibility was in so many areas that people are very reliant upon. Right. Just briefly, what does the county do? The county oversees healthcare. Healthcare means hospitals like the Wilma Chan Hospital, which is formerly the hospital that we have. We now have 4 or 5 hospitals that we're over in Alameda County, and not just Highland Hospital, which is where most people think of as a public hospital.
Right.
We have responsibility for mental health and mental wellness. We have responsibility for environmental health. And what is environmental health? Environmental health is making sure that weights and measures are correct. So when you go to pay for your gas, that you don't have Shell or Chevron beating you with this electronic device that you use to put your credit card in and get your gas. We go and check on that. We go and check on when you buy your meat and they put it on the scale is to weigh what it weighs, right? We go into restaurants to make sure that they're clean and people don't get sick because of environmental health. We have public health, which was completely over the pandemic. It wasn't the federal government. They funded a lot of it, and they didn't fund it to the extent that any locality needed because they didn't have the money and were caught off guard. The state, the same thing. Right. And it's the local public health department that oversees those kind of pandemics, right? As well as making people try to be proactive around their health. Then, as I said, sheriff's office, public defender, chief probation officer, the district attorney's office, public works. All of this is held together in terms of our communication network, in terms of our IT department. We have Ashland, Cherryland, and Castro Valley, which are cities that don't have government. We are their government, the 5 of us. They don't have a mayor. We operate in that. They don't have a city council. We operate in that. And so the sheriff is actually their police, whereas the Oakland has their own police, Berkeley has their own police, the other 14 cities have their own police. We're the police. And public works are the same thing in terms of making sure that the flood channels and all of those things that are commonly used by cities are taken care of. Senior care, child care, all of those things kind of are overviews of what the 5 of us oversee with a $4.5 billion budget and with 11,000 employees. Yeah. And so there's a balance you got to reach in order to keep all of those areas that people depend upon operating, maybe not to the extent you would want to personally, or even that department may want to personally, but with only so much resources and so much great need, you got to find that balance to provide at least reasonable and adequate services in all of those areas so that the system doesn't get clogged up in one place and things just get out of kilter. Yeah.
Well, I can understand why you have a hard time just picking one one thing you did. Yeah. I'm a basketball guy. I always go to an analogy, and I'm just imagining bouncing 11 to 20 basketballs at one time.
There you go.
That's, quite the feat. And, you can only do so much. But, yeah, I think, like I said, I know some of the things that you've done, and I would try to tease out something, Mr. Humble over here doesn't want to highlight, but it's fine. We'll let it be what it is. We're going to switch gears a little bit because, I feel like this is the side of you that definitely not in this depth or detail. It's been wonderful to learn all of these things, but, people kind of expect Keith to be Supervisor Carson. But we know you are also quite the human being. So there's another world where Keith Carson took a different path. Maybe he didn't go into politics. Maybe he didn't have that meeting. What would you be doing? Because I've heard some things. I know you used to cut a rug and everything, man. So
Yeah, well, remember I started off on the wild side to begin with, right? And that didn't mean that because I was fortunate enough to kind of have some guidance that I still didn't get. So I mean, Jiminy, what you're talking about is Sandre Swanson, who's a good friend of mine, lifelong friend of mine. Mm-hmm. We used to be promoters and used to host parties. Mm-hmm. Just around the time the black comedy started in this area. So we used to, and it was a business. So we would probably host about 20, 25 parties a year. Wow. On New Year's Day or New Year's Eve, we'd probably have a couple of parties going at the same time. Mm-hmm. A lot of times we'd have 800 to 1,000 people at our party. Mm. And so, we did that for quite some time. Yeah. I have started and owned a couple of businesses, the Berkeley Flea Market. Really? In Berkeley, I started that. And ran it for its early years. My dad would come in and support me and help me to run it, but I started it. Sandra and I owned a couple of other businesses. We had a restaurant called the other place on Alice and 13th for a while. Mm-hmm. We had a flower shop on 17th and Franklin for a while. I had a business going on, painting business. We did houses and painted, and a couple of people, that we did that. I did a lot of importing from out of the country in the early 80s and stuff. When I was running the Berkeley Flea Market, when I started the Berkeley Flea Market, people would come and sell their wares there, and I met a couple of people, stewardesses, that was always out of the country and bringing stuff to sell, and we hooked up a contract and a deal, and so I started in the 80s going to China. Before it got real popular, and we would sell stuff at Little Daisies and JMs and iMagnums and stuff like that. And so you asked what I would be doing. While I was very fortunate as a supervisor that one of the things that I had direct oversight for 30 of the 32 years was the largest business association in the East Bay, which included Contra Costa and Alameda County, called Economic Development Alliance for Business, which still is in existence. And
that EDA,
which gave me the opportunity to still kind of feed in on this other area that I always had an interest in, which was business, right? And so as a result of that, in East Bay EDA, even today, and throughout the whole time I was there, like the presidents and CEOs of most of the large businesses were very active. Bayer Corporation, Chevron, Clorox, Kaiser. Before Tesla was in Tesla, it was NUMI, New United Motors, which was a combination of General Motors and Toyota. Okay. And so we were back and forth in Japan all the time. As a delegation of business people to make sure that we kept that plant open, meeting with the Toyotas directly in Japan themselves, the family, as well as making sure that the supply chain was coming this way and kept it open. And then when they got ready to close down, we knew in advance that they were going to close, and because of different international connections we have, Ermina in our office, who's been on staff with me since day one, because I knew her even beforehand, the young lady who started the Asian Pacific Islander group, we went to China and asked this, at that time, a small car manufacturing plant to come and look at taking over NUMI before it closed. And so they came, went throughout NUMI, checked it out, The Toyotas heard about it, said, no, we don't want the Chinese competition in the United States. And they put a full press on us with General Motors to not allow this little small emerging company to come in. And then when Elon Musk started looking at the facility, Mina, who basically was a staff person that did most of the business stuff in our office, assisted in going through the acquisition aspect and helping in the initial stages of getting them set up before he stopped talking to any of us and changed it, and then his real behavior came out.
How they want it.
And then the real Elon Musk. That little small manufacturing company is called Build Your Dreams out of China. It is today the largest car manufacturing manufacturing company in the entire world. They make more electric cars than Tesla does in the entire world. Matter of fact, they have an electric car out now that you can pull into a thing that looks like a gas station in less than 5 minutes. They pop a new battery into you, pop your battery in, pop it out, and it goes 600 miles on a charge. That's the little small company.
Those guys.
Yeah, we didn't know they were getting ready to blow up like that because in the earlier stages when we were dealing with them and going back and forth to China, they would show us how batteries were being made. We'd have dinner and lunch with the owners of the company, and then all of a sudden, boom,
to the moon.
Too big for us.
Right, that's BYD now.
Yeah,
they're not
Build Your Dreams. Yeah,
that's wow. Keith, I never know where to start with you because it's just like, this is the side quest for Keith. This is not, his main, obviously, resume, but these are things that he's been a part of, connected to, involved
and
in.
we always tried to bring other people with us. Right. I want to cut you off for a second because there's some people who are in the area, black, because we took black delegations to China like 10, 15 years ago. And so Ken Houston, who is now in the Oakland City Council, Lynn Turner, who owns Turner Company and a number of businesses out there on Hagenberger. Or in the early days, we took them with us to China. And they made presentations in Cantonese that blew the Chinese away because they got people to put together their presentations back there, and they had PowerPoints and all this other stuff, right? I mean, we were constantly trying to say, hey, how can we share our connections with everybody?
I love that. That's amazing. So we've talked a little bit about background, present day, even alternate realities even. Let's take it to the future. What's next for Keith Carson?
I was always working on my exit plan because I never wanted to be an elected official.
To start with.
Yeah. So, I mean, I was like from day one trying to work with individuals, say, take over this job. Take over not just my job, but anything we can connect you to. And so along the way, we were always trying to do that, right? Probably 30 years ago, started the Black elected officials of the East Bay. Used to meet on a monthly basis at Jeffries. And that was blacks who were appointed, blacks who were elected in the East Bay, meeting together on a regular basis to leverage the knowledge of resources and to hopefully reach out high school, church, wherever in the community and introduce people to being at whatever table to help decide their own destiny, as opposed to somebody else saying this is your destiny. And so along the way, I think we've been fortunate that different people have been able to be at the table, exposed to the table, at the table, and developing learning their expertise in those areas. People over at Bayer Corporation, and I'm talking about people from the African American community at the moment. Same thing in the healthcare industry, the same thing in housing, all of those areas. So I feel as though along the way, just like for me, Ron taking a chance, Dellum's taking a chance on me, Harold Davis taking a chance on me, not saying, yeah, go ahead and send him to juvenile hall. We've been passing it forward. And not just me, but everybody in our office, bringing people along, exposing them, getting their foot in the door, trying to support them in that effort. So hopefully now you, Mike, and everybody else who's in their position are playing it forward, and an old man could sit in the corner on a rocking chair and have his wife give him honeydews to do every doggone day.
I love that. Right on. Okay, so thinking more broadly, what is a vision that you have for the future? Something that you would like to see us as a society achieve in your lifetime?
Yeah, I don't say that I know everything, and I'm very appreciative to the exposures that I've had in a number of different areas. So I'm kind of a generalist. I'm not a specialist in anything, and so I always respect people who have a more specialized knowledge than I do. I'm saying that because my wish is, and it's even harder to say that wish today based on what's happening daily in Washington, D.C. With Elon Musk and the Trump administration.
Did you watch that press conference thing?
I watch everything that they do. Yeah. I don't miss nothing they do.
I couldn't bring myself to watch it, but it's definitely on my YouTube watch because it's vital information.
Yeah.
I
because of Ron Dellums, I owe so much to him, and I'm so happy that my parents and everybody embraced my dad, my mom. While my dad was alive, my mom, both dad are deceased. Really embraced him, and he embraced our family. He basically said, if you have a fundamental belief, you shouldn't fear somebody challenging your fundamental belief, or you don't have a fundamental belief, right? and so that means you have to know what you know, and you have to study what you don't know, and that's the opposing side, the opposite side. And I'm saying that because even with the opposite side, there's been times I reached out to people on the opposite side, Republicans, including people who've been like chair of the Republican Party for the state of California, say, I got somebody who I want to introduce you to. They kind of interested in trying to make a connection here, and they do it, right? Yeah. I'm saying that because even philosophically where they may be, the wish and the hope is that the door stays open. And I'm feeling as though Trump in particular and all the people who have supported him, not just those in Washington, D.C., but, I think that the people who supported him are a reflection of his values, but they live in our community. Right. They live with us, right? And I say that because they may be a person who works in an employment agency, and when you come, they already said you ain't getting employed, right? Yeah. But so they blocking you, right? Or they could be the person that says, "I'll give you a chance," like somebody else, right? And I'm feeling as though all of those things that are important to incentivize individuals that there's more out there are being snuffed out. Don't want people to know about their ethnic history being snuffed out. Underfunding public schools, making it more attractive to go to a private school, even if it's a private elementary school. So that means you are further dividing people and sending them on different tracks. Right. One track may be jail, and the other track is the opportunity to go forward, right? And I think those individuals who reflect Trump's values are right here. I see them every day. I'm here, and they're coming out of the woodwork. They're showing up at the meeting saying, yeah, well, if you want to close a school, don't close this school, close the other school, because the other school, which is in the flatland, the parents may not be there to say the same thing, like protect our school, because they're out there trying to make sure that they keep a roof over their heads
Working
and
that third
clothes.
job,
They're
right.
working that third job, right? And unfortunately, many times it may be a single parent working that three jobs.
Yeah.
And so I think there are two things. That there has to be the door still open, and we got to fight for the door staying open, even if it's fighting in your own personal interest, your area that is very personal to you, right? We got to do that, and we also got to know, and this has been hard for me, and this is what I started to say that Ron taught me. I spend as much time watching Fox News, as much time watching the BBC or Bloomberg as I would watch Channel 2 or CNN. I know where I am philosophically.
Right.
I want to see what they're saying, where they're going, what they're doing. Because if we're going to try to make a difference, we got to kind of know not only where we are, but we got to come up with a strategy to address where they are.
Yeah.
Because at the moment, they're blocking everything. They're closing it all down. They're closing it down locally. They're closing it down within the family structure. They're closing down our ability to even go and do foreign travel like we have for so many years. When
Not making friends.
we're not making friends at all. We're really shutting those doors, right? And the only people who are going to benefit from that is the top 10% or the top 3%
Right.
that are benefiting financially from these decisions that are being made.
Right.
I mean, nobody's really questioning Elon Musk saying, I'm going to purchase OpenAI, I'm going to control this, and I'm going to close down these departments, and I'm going to have people to take an early retirement, or I'm going to fire you. I mean, nobody's questioning that in a real sense.
Yeah.
And so we have to individually step up for our own self-interest. We can't feel as though it's all fatalistic.
Yeah.
We got to feel just like our parents from the past. They gave up their life in order to try to make a difference for their kids and their kids to come and their grandkids. They gave up their lives at a time in which somebody can lynch you and ain't nobody gonna question you.
It won't be on camera.
It ain't gonna be on camera, right? In which they could say, you got to move off of this property. And you go like, well, that's my property. No, it's not your property. I'm taking it, right? And you didn't have any legal recourse, right? And so they were doing it at a time which was really rough.
Yeah.
And we feel as though it's rough, and it's rough for us in our time.
Right.
But we're going to have to kind of square our shoulders
Put up a fight.
and put up a fight.
Yeah. No, I think you said something that I really just want to echo, because I think people have the tendency to follow what's comfortable, in the sense where it's like, you know, social media, everybody kind of has control over what information is fed to them a little bit more. So like, you know, like you said, you intentionally watch Fox when you know maybe CNN or Channel 2 has more of what you align with. I think it's kind of the inverse typically when people build their own timelines. Like, you know, I'm not going to follow Elon Musk or Donald Trump. I'm just going to, like, you know, kind of tune them out, and it forms what I call, or, you know, I've heard it called the echo chamber, right? It's like, you know, people that agree with me, y'all can stay. Everybody else, I'm blocking you, I'm deleting you, because I don't want to hear that mess. But to your point, I think it's at least from a strategic standpoint, even though it can be mentally taxing or daunting, it's like you kind of have to go through that exposure therapy to be able to be aware and understand the other side. But I also like to think of it as, from a tactical standpoint, of you almost need to know their narrative to be able to unpack it, disarm it, challenge it, whatever you want to say. So I got to make my reference. That's just what I do. But if anybody's ever seen the movie 8 Mile with Eminem, his life story and stuff like that, the last scene where he comes on stage and he's like, oh, you let that guy go first. So Eminem goes first and he just dumps everything he knows the guy's going to say and diss him. So it's like completely disarmed. You can't say anything about me because I've already studied, where you're probably going to go with this. And, now what next, right?
Yeah.
So I think it's kind of from a strategic standpoint, really, really necessary for us to kind of have our 8 Mile moment and start opening our ears a little bit and seeing what the other side is saying so that you can actually understand it and, deconstruct it and put it back on them.
Right. Yeah. And again, I'm very just so happy that I learned that lesson from somebody, and we constantly try to play it forward to everybody else because it's hard to do that.
It is.
There's only so many hours in a day.
Right.
You try to go down your path, but in order to get over those hurdles, sometimes you got to know how many hurdles there are out there.
Exactly. Gotta do the work.
Yeah.
We understand. You kind of alluded to it with the moment politically, and everybody, whether you're trying to think about it or not, some part of your mental mind is aware of it. How do you stay grounded and stay focused and stay committed to the work in the capacity that you are right now with, everything that's going on? Because it can, like we said, be daunting, be overwhelming even for a lot of people.
Well, it's really, really, really hard. Yeah. And I mean that sincerely. It's not harder than it was 10 years ago. It was hard 10 years ago. Yeah. And I say that because, to just be brutally honest, with groups that you have an affinity with groups you align with, and groups you really want to help, a lot of times they don't have the infrastructure to help themselves, right? And they've not had some of the exposures to help themselves. And so the resistance, while it's not resistance that's on purpose, the resistance sometimes is just because they haven't been exposed or they're a little ignorant to things or they don't have the infrastructure to help. And so in that case, it's been a challenge for staff and myself because I hear it as much from staff. So that means I got to hear it from them, and then I got to also experience it myself. They got to kind of hound people that we're trying to work with. Especially the ones that don't have that support base, right? That has never been exposed to the stuff, so it's all new, right? And that's survival stuff. I'm not talking about the politics stuff. It's just everyday survival. It's kind of like we fought and we got you this check. We keep calling you every week to come and pick up your check. Yeah. You go like, well, why didn't they just pick up the check? Well, you got to keep calling and say, oh, man, my car broke down, whatever it is, right? Well, we finally got it because we know that at some point when you get the check, you're going to use it for its intended purpose and it'll help out. We know that, right? And whereas other people are kind of going like, can I get a check? And you're going like, well, you got a good infrastructure. You really don't need the money, and I'll give you a quarter of what you're asking for, and they're there before you write the check. Yeah. You go like, damn, right? So I'm saying that because the whole point is you got to figure out how you stay in the game and keep trying to help despite your feelings and despite the obstacles and the challenges. And I've always had to share that with staff, and staff shared it with me. I'm very blessed that I have an incredible wife with Maria. She's always been very clear when I'm not clear. She can see the stuff I can't see, right? Yeah. And she's always been very direct, so I never have to guess.
No question marks. Yeah.
No question marks there. And, and so as a result of that, it's helped to keep me kind of on the path. It's kind of like, what you complaining about?
Ground you a little bit.
Yeah. You got this, you got that. They don't have that. So you didn't get there by yourself, that kind of thing. And then because of my father and mother and what they instilled in me and our sisters growing up, especially individuals who didn't have the infrastructure of a mom and dad growing up, didn't graduate from high school growing up, grew up in the deep South. Having that as a base for saying you got to keep going forward. Yeah, things are going to hurt. They're going to slow you down, but you got to keep going forward. You don't want to be, as my mom used to say, stuck in the mud, right? And so that kind of drive early on to kind of grow up in a church which played a lot of significant roles without maybe knowing they were, right? While some people go like, you go to church and you got to do this and that, it was also a learning institution.
Yeah.
An educational institution beyond the Bible.
Right.
It was an educational institution, right? And it gave you a lot of chances to develop different skill sets that you might not have gotten if you weren't there, right? That was a part of the building block. And I like I said, since I can remember, I work out. And again, I joke about it. I can't afford a psychologist, but it's real.
Right.
And so I go put on my gospel music and blast my brains out. And there's a heavy bag. And I put on my gloves and I put the faces on there of people I want to knock out. I'm serious. And I go at it. And then after I kind of sweat and I can't lift my arms anymore, and take a shower, that I can go to work and I can see that person and say, hey, what's going on? It ain't there no more.
You got it out.
Until tomorrow when I got to go back to the gym, right?
After they say what they said.
Yeah. But it is also, you got to keep moving forward, right? And there's a lot of things to deter you from that because when I've said in the past to some people who are friends, I go like, oh, you need to call this person. Well, that person is Republican. I said, yeah, we know that. They know that. So we're clear about where we are. But they may be able to help you take a couple more steps in that direction. You won't owe them anything. You just, that is another way to keep you moving in the direction you want to go. You know, it doesn't mean you have to embrace them. And that don't mean you owe them anything. Right.
Yeah, that's some game right there, man. I heard a couple things. You got to have solid support systems, sounding boards, people that can keep you grounded and tell it to you straight. You got to have drive. You got to lock in at the end of the day. You got to keep moving forward. I love that. I got one for you. I'm curious how you're going to respond to this because I know this is probably really not your style, but Keith Carson is now president of the world. You get executive orders. No pushback, no resistance. What's something that you would implement to try and get people moving in the right direction?
I've been really watching Trump's movements with intensity. He was very clear where he was going the whole time.
Straight in our face.
Yeah, I'm doing this, I'm doing that. And he's doing it, right? Because at the moment, he hasn't gotten any resistance, right? And it'd be interesting to see how it plays out.
Right.
But, I mean, he's beaten everybody into submission so far.
Right.
So I don't know if I had all of the same conditions that were preferable to where I wanted to go. I think moving as speedily as you can. Some people, I don't necessarily. Some people criticize Barack because they said he could have been more aggressive. You need to be more aggressive, and then let it play out. See how it plays out. Because if you kind of do it in a measured sense, you might get there, or somebody else might get there after you pass the baton to them, but you won't experience it.
Right. So there's no, y'all got to do this because we need to do better on this.
There's not a specific stuff. No, you just gotta keep moving. Can't be a stick in the mud. Yeah.
There you go. Okay. What else can I ask you while we have you? This has been wonderful, man. I don't want to let you go, but I ain't going to hold you longer than I should. So I'm going to check the phone one more time. If there's nothing else, well, Keith, I can't tell you how much I've enjoyed this, man. I really can't. Thank you. So if it's not going to come, I guess, directly from a Keith Carson, President of the World executive order, what are just some things that you feel like everyday things that people can do to take actionable steps into what their vision is of a brighter future? Where can they kind of get started?
So maybe I'll end it with this. And I'm being sincere. I'm not just being placating the moment. I think podcasts are very, very critical. I really, really, really do. To have people tell their own stories, to other people hear their stories and say, "Oh, I can identify with that." It's good to see that somebody can identify with that. A case in point, Lonnie Morris is a good friend of mine who I met inside San Quentin 20-some years ago. He was in there for 40-some years. He'd been released. He runs No More Tears. I learned so much. My mother went into San Quentin. My wife went into San Quentin. The county administrator went into San Quentin. The district attorney, Nancy O'Malley, went in. We took other people. We actually took Tony West before he became the top third person in the justice system in the United States into San Quentin. He happens to be Kamala Harris's brother-in-law.
Oh.
And but we knew him way before that, and they used to go on the walk.
Yeah.
And so I'm saying that because people being able to tell their own stories, the people from the disability community, brothers that are trying to figure it out, what's the relationships like, to have those kind of conversations, people identify with them and say, wow, they're just like me. I didn't know. I'm listening to that.
Yeah.
As opposed to some of the other stuff that's been manufactured to do that. It's more real.
Right.
And so I think being able to maximize the use of this opportunity through podcasts is critical, especially at this time.
Right on. Well, we definitely appreciate that. It's nice to feel like we're doing something, some of the right things, steps in the right direction, trying to find our way. Before we let you go, Keith, we like to round it off. Just anything you feel like people should hear, any energy you want to leave us with, the floor and the mic is yours.
Yeah, I just think people got to, in hard times, believe in themselves. And that's really difficult, That doesn't mean you have to be arrogant,
right?
Because you could take it too far. But there are not as much opportunities for you to start feeling good about you, because all you hear all day long, especially now, is doom and gloom.
Right.
You won't be able to do it because this. Well, just like all the artists that you see on TV that they get these awards and say, I never thought I'd be up here, I never thought I'd do it. It was because they were persistent, despite all odds, that allowed them to hold up whatever award they got on the world stage. And you could do that on a human stage, in between your relationships, by just continuing to move forward, on a work, educational, community engagement level, business level. It just got to believe in you.
I love that. You heard it here, people. Believe in yourself. You can make a change, a positive change that we do want to see in the world. And like my brother Keith Carson always says, we gonna make it, y'all.
We gonna make it.
Yes, sir. Keith, this has been such a pleasure. Thank you so much.
Appreciate you, brother.
Thank you all for joining
Appreciate you
us.
both.
Everybody, Keith Carson.
Thanks, Jiminy. Thanks, Michael.